Welcome everyone to the Ownr webinar series. I am Jessie Zhao, your host today, as well as every Thursday. Thanks for being here with me today. It's week 3 of the weekly webinars, and so I started to get a little bit more used to talking to the camera by myself thing, but I can't see you and I can't hear you. So I would highly encourage you using the live chat box on your screen to communicate with me. Let me know that you are there and you're tracking with me. You can simply say hi, tell me how you're feeling today, or posting your comments and questions throughout the hour. I will make sure that I monitor the feed and address any comments and questions. If this is the first time you're attending the Ownr webinar series, it's a series of educational content that we design for entrepreneurs and business owners, or somebody who's thinking about starting a business. Ownr is a digital business launch platform, and thanks to your help in the past 2+ years, we have helped over 15,000 businesses to start in Canada. So it's really our way to give back to the community during this difficult time. And the Ownr webinar series is only one of the many initiatives that we're working on to give back to the community. As a matter of fact, yesterday we just launched Ownr grants to help out business owners as well as aspiring entrepreneurs. We will pin the link to the top of the chat. You can check it out, see if you're eligible. Maybe you can get some financial support. And also, every week we try to bring you a different topic related to a small business. We try to invite a different speaker, cover a variety of topics. Sometimes it's more inspirational and conversational, and sometimes it's more classroom-like. So we teach you how to do certain things. If you were here last week or the week before, you probably know that we have learned about how to do social media for small businesses. And last week we had an entrepreneur sharing how he moved his service from offline to online. So we want to know what format that you resonate better, or if there's any topic that you want to learn and that's not yet being shared. We have a survey link also pinned to the top of your chat box. Please, at the end of this webinar, fill that out. It only takes a minute. Let us know how you liked it and what else you want to learn, and we will be sure to bring it to you. So last week we discovered a different project, and this week I thought let's switch gear and diving into the mysterious minds. This is so on top of the mind and highly anticipated topic. I think this current situation has presented a very unique and unprecedented challenge to many of us. For the first time, kids don't know what to do, but their parents don't know what to do either. And many of us are feeling lost in managing our emotions while having to deal with the more tangible challenges in business and personal life. So we thought we will ask one of the best in the field of psychology for some advice. So today's speaker, she is a renowned psychologist and entrepreneur herself. Has been interviewed by Toronto Star on the subject of resilience in this particular time. So I'm so honored to bring her expertise to you guys, the Ownr audience, and share with you. Please help me give a warm welcome to the owner and practice lead of Canada Career Counselling, Meghan Reid. Welcome, Meghan.
Hi, Jessie. Nice to be with you today.
Thank you for being here. I'm just going to pretend to applaud on behalf of the whole audience. I know we can't see them, but I'm pretty sure they're so excited.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm happy to join. Happy to talk to everybody today. This is my second live stream ever, so I'm in the beginner box with you. But yeah, definitely an important few topics here that we're going to cover today, and I hope this provides people with some help.
For sure. I think we're all, for the first time, dealing with a lot of new changes and trying to get familiar with a lot of new things, this webinar included. So we're all in this together. Today, I know We have received so many questions for people who register for the webinar. All your questions have been given to Megan, and we'll try to cover as many as possible in the next little while. But don't you worry, we have arranged plenty of time at the end of after Megan's discussion, and at the end of the webinar, we'll answer all your questions. And please use the live chat box. This is the one time you can really take advantage of Megan's time and expertise to ask any questions related to psychology, any challenges that you may have, any advice you want to ask Megan. So
Yeah, I would second that too, Jesse. Ask your questions. I'm happy to answer them. And I kind of think about this like back in school, like when the teacher said, if you have a question, somebody else probably has the same question. So put it out there.
Absolutely. I have a lot of questions myself, but I know a lot of them are very similar just based on talking to friends, family around. These are the four areas I keep seeing questions falling into. Number one is resilience. So dealing with difficult feelings and emotions. Number two is working from home best practices. Now life and work start to blend in. And for the parents out there, it's also an extra layer of challenge is protecting their own mental health as well as helping their children, help guide their children. And of course, this is a business entrepreneurial platform. We also want to address any business experiences. I know Megan yourself, your business had to pivot during this time. So I would love to dive into that a little bit as well, just to share your experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. And with your video last week, if you did have a small business owner talking about how they adjusted their business, I guess it'll be interesting for people who are watching both to kind of compare and take from that conversation last week and see what's similar and what's different between what I've done with my business. So, yeah.
100%. So highly anticipated. Let's just dive right in. Resilience. What does that mean? I think when I think of that, I also think of other words that I saw in the questions: anxiety, stress. These depression may not be the right word, but the feeling of just being stuck in a rut. So let's dive into that. Are they normal? Why do we have these feelings? How do we manage those feelings? I'll turn it to you.
Yeah, I'm glad we're starting with this topic because this is definitely on everybody's mind. Resilience is a word that's thrown around a lot, so I'll share what it means, but really when I'm thinking about it and when it comes up is dealing with those emotions like you're talking about. So anybody who's feeling stressed, worried, anxious, overwhelmed is a big one I'm hearing now. Any of those types of emotions, I kind of wrap them all into anxiety. And physiologically, what's going on in your body is all very similar with all of those things: worry, stress, anxiety. So resilience and what it is basically the process of adapting in the face of adversity or trauma or tragedy or something like that. So how you adapt is what resilience is: adapting in the face of that adversity. And it's a really easy way to think about it is just bouncing back. That's what resilience means. And I guess the good news is resilience is kind of like a muscle or a skill. So it's not something where, oh, some people aren't resilient and some people are. Everybody has the capacity to be resilient, and it is something that you can actively work on and improve. So if you are feeling anxious or overwhelmed with everything going on, consider how you're adapting and I guess listen in, and I can share some tips and some strategies on how to improve your resilience.
Yeah, that's a good segue. I think number one is to acknowledge that this is normal. This is a natural response, and it's okay to have those feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And then the
And,
next, sorry.
and I guess just to your point, Jesse, anything, interestingly, any sort of change in someone's life, whether it's a positive change or a negative change, so it could be going on a trip to a loved one passing away, any sort of change has an impact on your body, your central nervous system, and it does cause stress. So even if it's a positive change, and obviously right now it's not a positive change for everybody, so the fact that people are struggling is 100% normal.
For sure. Not to mention, this is such a sudden change.
Mm-hmm.
One day it went just from one extreme to completely different.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, yeah, and it's something that there's a lot of uncertainty. Uncertainty in and of itself is stressful for people too, because it's the opposite of feeling like you're in control, lacking control.
yeah, yeah. Let's just dive into the tips then. If people keep having these feelings, what should we do and how do we manage that?
Well, I think the biggest thing to be aware of is perception. And why I say that is because this comes from a psychologist who has been studying resilience for over 25 years and looking at what are the differences between people who demonstrate resilience and who don't. And one of the biggest factors is perception. And so what he's saying is that events in and of themselves are not stressful. The reaction that you have could be stressful or could not be. So it's how you're thinking about this. And for those of you listening, I'm not sure if you've ever heard of cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT, but the way I think about it really simply is like a triangle, and a triangle that has three corners. I guess all triangles do. And if you think about one corner being cognitions or thoughts, one corner being behaviors, and then one corner being emotions. Those three corners all impact each other. How you feel, your emotions impact what you think. What you think impacts how you feel. How you feel impacts what you do. They all bounce around. Sometimes there's a trigger and sometimes there's not. In this case, if we throw COVID-19 into the mix, that a lot of people have a lot of things that they're thinking about, and that can make them feel stressed. And then what are your behaviors? Are you somebody who's isolating? Are you binge eating? Are you keeping up with your exercise? So I think thinking about that perception is really key. And then if you are feeling a negative emotion of some type, like stress or anxiety, what I recommend is think about your cognitions and think about your behaviors, because if you change one corner of that triangle, oftentimes it impacts the other ones. And the hardest corner to just change is the emotions. So, if someone just says to you, well, just stop feeling stressed or just stop worrying about that, easier said than done. So if I'm feeling some type of negative emotion, and that could include other things too, like anger, guilt, shame, fear, anything like that, any of the negative emotions, my first thought, and this is what I do in my personal life and what I recommend to clients, is I think about, is it easier to change what I'm thinking or what I'm doing? Those other two corners of the triangle. And there's a lot of different cognitive strategies you can try, and there's a lot of different behavioral strategies you can try. So that's kind of the direction that I go in. And oftentimes when you challenge your thoughts or you shift a behavior, oftentimes the emotion changes along with it, and it can put you in a better mood. I think one thing that is really important to acknowledge or just address as well is that it's not a fixed thing, right? It's not like you're just going to not be anxious for the rest of the COVID-19 situation. Emotions ebb and flow, and so it is a continuous process. And I think the awareness is really key. So awareness of what you're thinking. You can't change anything if you don't have awareness. So when you are stressed out, what is your typical reaction? Do you sit and ruminate and worry, 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 worry? Do you stop contacting your loved ones or your friends and you keep more isolated? So starting to be aware of how you react and what that looks like can help you change to more healthy behaviors.
Yeah, definitely. And that just reminded me a couple of things. I think I read it somewhere about doing jumping jacks. If you are in a feeling a little bit down, the easiest way to change that mood immediately is start doing jumping jacks, because your action changes and then that changes your feeling and emotion and the thoughts and all that.
Yep. Yep, absolutely. That can be one for sure. For me, one of the ones, and it's a simple one that you can do inside, like I'll take a shower. Like normally I'm a once a day showerer, but sometimes there are days in this pandemic where I've just decided in the middle of the afternoon, like I need to take another shower, just because it just can snap you out of it. It's a behavior, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Shower, walks, dressing up,
Hmm.
putting makeup on, even though most
Yep.
of the days we don't feel like doing it. Any change of that, like the regular new routine, could
Hmm.
kind of pull you out of the existing condition. And
Hmm.
I believe something that I read about, and maybe you can comment on this, is about CBT. Is when you have one kind of thinking, let's find evidence that support this statement as well as evidence that's against the statement.
Hmm.
Then often in time it helps you neutralize your statement. Then you helps you to realize, okay, this might not be the most um, objective statement of the current situation.
Yeah, and what that strategy is called is reality testing. So if you are aware, and that's the big thing, right? You have to be aware of your thoughts. And in human nature and just life, how we go through our day, we are always thinking, but you're not necessarily thinking about your thinking. So that's the hard part. But the biggest step is just being aware of patterns and ways that you naturally think. And so there's different types of cognitive distortions, is what I would call them. And that's kind of like unhealthy thinking patterns. So if it is always you go to the worst case scenario or you're catastrophizing, another example would be all or nothing thinking, where if it's either all or, and it's a lot of the time there's a mid ground, like, oh my gosh, we're never going to get out of this pandemic. Okay, test the reality for that. Or if you're like, oh my God, I'm going to get fired, or I'm not going to be able to pay the bills this month. What is the evidence? Have you taken time to kind of slow that down and think things through? Big things that I'm looking for with people who are struggling with resilience is that they procrastinate a lot or make excuses. Anything around anger, frustration, feeling defensive, or being really reactive, kind of just being immobilized and feeling like you're not capable of doing anything. Another one that I'm just keeping an eye on with clients is around whether it's medicating or drinking, kind of escapism behaviors.
Mhm.
Um, Ruminating is a big one. So when I say ruminating, it's that you are thinking about the same thing over and over again. Um, and then lack of taking initiative, needing to control or micromanage. Like there's so many different ones I could list, but if those are things that you can identify with, then I do think it is important to kind of check in with what you're thinking and how you're feeling about this pandemic, your work, your family, all those sorts of things. And then again, consider challenging those thoughts. What's another way you can think about it? Or a guilt is a big one that's coming up too, where people are like, oh my gosh, like I should be doing more. I'm not accomplishing enough. I'm not being as good of a parent as I want to be.
Mhm.
And one of the strategies I use there is called externalizing. And a lot of the time when something is going on in your head or in your body, again, you don't think about your thoughts. So I think about it like a string that just turns into a big knot. And if you externalize, which means get it out of your head. So whether that's writing it down on a piece of paper, whether that means thinking about another person. So for example, if your friend came to you and said like, oh my gosh, I let the kids watch TV for 3 hours today. Like I feel like a horrible mom. What would you say? What would you say to your friend? You would say like, oh my gosh, well, don't do it every day, but like, no worries. Like yesterday was really stressful for you. Like it'll be fine. We'll get through this. Like don't beat yourself up.
Yeah,
And if you would say that to a friend, then how can you apply that to yourself? You know what I mean? I think it's only fair that the compassion and empathy that you have for other people, you provide to yourself as well.
for sure. Um, so reality testing,
Mhm.
perspective. Now I sound so smart. Uh, and controlling the actions, the three pillars of the CBT. Um, what if this reoccurring anxiety comes back over and over? Some days, even myself, some days I feel totally normal, even happy, and some other days I have my moments and a hit. And
Mhm.
I personally think that I'm a relatively more resilient person, but for
Mhm.
somebody who has never experienced it before, it still takes time to build that muscle. Like, is
Mhm.
there anything else that they can do in order to maintain or relatively stabilize their mood?
Hmm. Well, I think coming up with a personal success plan is probably one of the it's a big recommendation. I'll break it down, but it's one of the most useful things. So there's a couple questions that I ask myself, or that I would have a client ask themselves. I just had somebody yesterday I was working with, and they're just back to work, still working remotely, but after a stress leave, a leave of absence. And so one of the questions that I asked them was, how do you want to show up? How do you want to show up at work? And you can think about that, kind of those pillars again, physically, mentally, emotionally. And you can think about that in each day or each week.
Mhm.
So, as with work, if you do have your own business, if you're working for somebody else, as a parent, as a partner, and I would recommend actually writing things down. How do you want to show up? And then you start to consider, how can you show up that way? What are the things that you can do or that you need to do in order to show up that way? So whether it's, I want to show up positively, or I want to show up um, and be really engaged today, or I want to be really calm today or really positive today, those sorts of things. And thinking about how you can do that, whatever your situation is. What would that look like if you were showing up positively? And then follow through on those behaviors. So I think, again, this does touch on awareness, because it's bringing awareness to what your day is and kind of setting a plan for yourself. And I also think it's important to break goals down and be realistic about them. So sometimes people have heard of SMART goals, and that the SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time sensitive. So, I know one challenge for people right now is that they've been laid off or they're out of work. And so, if their goal is, I need to get a new job, that is a very stressful, undefined sort of goal. And for me, I know if I were in that situation, my tendency would be to just avoid it, like everything, because I just am stressed out and I don't want to deal with it. And if I make a plan of, I want to show up in a calm way today, and I want to start to work towards my goal of getting a new job, I'm going to break that goal down into SMART goals. So, for example, maybe it's, today I'm going to work on my resume and complete the update. And for me, that would be, that's specific. It's measurable. I do it or I don't. I feel like it's realistic. It's one document. I can do it today. Time sensitive. I said I'm going to do it today. So it's like you give yourself really clear parameters around a goal. And so that big goal of getting a new job, I might break that down into 20 small goals. And oftentimes what you see is, once you start with one, it's easier to move to the next. And I would recommend for people listening, write those goals down so it's something that you can see and you can check off your list.
Yeah, that's really great recommendation. Intention is set the tone and then set the goals so you have
Mm-hmm.
action plans.
Exactly.
Great advice. I think that taps into the next category a little bit in terms of working from home best practices.
Mm-hmm.
We got questions about, I don't know what to do with my time, or I hear is, my life is my work is my life. I don't know where to start and stop.
Mm-hmm.
um,
That's what I was seeing. Especially, I've found my clients now are starting to sink into a bit of routine and get used to things. But that was probably the most challenging thing for people, that I was hearing when this all started. And a lot of people, it was actually, they couldn't stop working. They just weren't shutting their computer. They were just staying attached, and they're like, I'm just working all the time. And so I think the first recommendation that I would have, and I'm assuming a lot of people have implemented this one already, but in working from home, something that's really key is having a designated space or spot that you're working from. So whether that's, you have a home office, that's great. A lot of people don't have a home office, so maybe it's, I set up at the kitchen table, or maybe you have two people working in your household and somebody's got to be in a bedroom, and it's a challenging time, but have a spot that you work. So when you go there, you're focused on work as best as you can be, and then leave that space when you're done working, and try and keep your routine as close to your typical work routine as you can. So that's not realistic for everybody, but I think having a plan for your day, generally the time that you're going to be working and the things that you want to accomplish is key. I think also taking kind of breaks to detach is really important throughout your day. And so a lot of people, they get stressed out and they have so much on their plate and they just dive right in. And so even though it seems counterintuitive, it's like if you actually take a step back and make a plan first, you're going to be more effective in the work that you do. And taking breaks allows you to actually be more productive. So even though you're not working for as much time, like if you take a 15-minute break, for me, I am fortunate enough to have a yard. I'm not in a condo. So for me, I might go sit outside on my chair for 15 minutes and drink my coffee and then get back to work. So I have that kind of planned into my day when that's going to occur. Another strategy I'll give you, or another analogy, because I like analogies, that I use for people even before this whole pandemic hit, is I think about your day like a jar. And you can put different things in your jar. You can put sand in your jar, pebbles in your jar, and rocks in your jar. And making the plan first is basically figuring out what are your big rocks. And what I think is a realistic but fair kind of goal is I think about 3 to 5 big rocks that I want to accomplish in my day. So for me today, one of my big rocks was doing this live stream with you. Another one was preparing for this live stream. And then I had some clients. So 3 to 5 big rocks. And that could be things that are in your work life or in your personal life. Maybe it's an important email you need to send, something like that. And start with the big rocks. Because for me, if I don't make a plan or I don't think about those big rocks, my day is going to get filled up with sand. And if you fill your jar with sand, there's no room for the big rocks. So you start with the big rocks, the sand can fill in around it. For me, my sand is emails. If I don't make a plan, I can get on my email and I could do emails for 8 hours a day. And then I'm going to have pushed off all the important things that I need to do. So that's a way that I think about kind of planning for your day.
Yeah, 100%. And talking about emails, I think a lot of us share that same challenge. And what I learned from you is scheduling the chunk of time for the big rocks. And even last week, the speaker shared his advice as well as the 50-10 rule. So within an hour, 60 minutes, he said 15 minutes, non-interrupted, undisrupted time to do work, and then set the 10 minutes to take a break. And within that dedicated time, no disruption, meaning don't check your email, don't respond to anything until you finish your task at hand. So these are the big rocks. So I am practicing that.
Good job. Yeah, and that's the same for a lot of other things. So this morning, I had two clients who work for Deloitte. So they're in the consulting space. They have stakeholders. They are busy. They've got emails coming and meetings all the time. And what we talked about was blocking certain time in their day that was, they call it admin. I call it in my schedule admin. For me, that means I can do emails, have quick conversations I need to have, make a quick call to my office manager, eat my lunch. And I make sure, like in an 8-hour day, I have 2 admin hours all the time. For me, I'm not concerned where in my day they are. I'm okay for it to flex around, but I know I've got those 2 hours that are blocked physically in my schedule. And then every once in a while, something is important enough that maybe I cut into that time, but I always have that set out initially so that that time is planned for. Because I find otherwise, it's the end of the day and I have a million things that I could do because I let all my time fill up. So it's just taking more control over your time. But there's other sand out there too. Like, for example, for those of you that have kind of internal communication systems where you can get pinged at any moment, well, put yourself on away. You're allowed to do that. That's okay. With emails, something I know you and I have talked about, and this is actually just important with all work in general. The world of work has obviously changed drastically over the past 50 years. And the pace of work and the volume of things coming at you every day, it just goes up and up and up. And so you have to be intentional about slowing it back down. And so with emails, if somebody doesn't hear back from you for 2 hours, that's fine. And so for people who have focused work to be doing, like project work or proposals or documents that they're creating, shut your email off. Just exit out of it so you don't have those notifications coming up and interrupting you. And then schedule those times to look at your email. So, I don't think it's realistic to just not check your emails for the day, but maybe you do it first thing in the morning and then at your lunch hour and then somewhere in the middle of your afternoon or end of your day. And if you think about it for yourself, how many emails do you get a day that it would be an issue if you didn't respond for 2 or 3 hours? And my guess is there's not that many. And if it is pressing, maybe the person will call you or something like that.
Totally. It's the human desire and the urge of clearing out that unread email.
Well, and I'll tell you another analogy I use, and this obviously depends on the person, but as I know a lot of business owners are listening to this, I had this conversation with somebody today too. I think about different jobs in different ways, but as a business owner, for the most part, I'm going to assume or align your job with a marathon. It's an ongoing thing. There is never, you could work 24 hours a day on your business and never get to the end, as opposed to a job like, in my younger years, a couple of my jobs where I worked at Tim Hortons. That was my very first job ever. And I worked in a factory. And those are the two hardest jobs I've ever had, by the way. But those are race jobs as opposed to marathon jobs, because you go in, you do your work, and when you clock out, somebody else clocks in and just takes over. So it's kind of like you pass the baton. Whereas as a small business owner, or outside of that too, a lot of people's work, they have their own email, their own responsibilities, and if you're not doing it, it's not getting done. And so you can't run your day like a race, or you'll run out of energy. And what that looks like in real life is a lot of those stress, overwhelm, negativity, anxiety, depression, burnout is the biggest one that I see. And so my advice is think about your day like a marathon. You have to pace yourself. And that's why those detachment breaks are important. That's why planning in time for the sand and the big rocks is important, because it doesn't stop and it's going to be there. And so that's what you have control over, is how you show up and how you handle it. And a lot of people feel like, well, they're emailing me, they're bombarding me with emails. You can't control other people. All those things are still going to come at you, or still could come at you, but you have to choose, do I want to open the door? Do I want to run that race? Is that something I want to deal with right now? And awareness and being aware of how you typically handle things and being aware of that big picture pattern in your life is a great first step, because once you have awareness of that pattern that you fall into, then you can start to recognize as the day goes on, oh, I'm doing that thing again, and it's actively changing the behavior or the way you think about it as your day goes on.
For sure. And on that topic, I think if this is a normal circumstance, we can practice the marathon theory. And because of the COVID, a lot of things have to either pivot very quickly, or there's a lot of pressure on producing things more faster and more than usual. So either you have a business yourself and you have to take on, or you work for somebody. There's just simply higher volume of the workload. How do we still prevent that type of burnout? Well, either some people may feel guilty not finishing the work, or some people just, because this is my business, so I must act on it. How do we prevent that burnout in this particular event?
Well, I think, again, going back to what we started with the changes that have happened, it is inevitable that people are going to feel some degree of stress or overwhelm, because it's a change. It's a shift in the way we're working, the way we're living our lives, everything. And so I think being kind to yourself and having fair and realistic expectations is key. For me, I'm a huge extrovert. I like going to the office. I like being around people. That energizes me and gets me going. And so working from home is a struggle. And I'm taking it easy on myself. Like I said, I think about, what are the things that I need to accomplish today? What are those big rocks? And that is what I need to get done. And if I get that done, even if I do absolutely nothing else, I've had a successful day. Um, and I think my productivity depends on the hour, depends on the day, has decreased slightly. I know probably the thing that I am not keeping up on as well as emails, and I'm not beating myself up for it. It's understandable. In the first weeks of the pandemic, when I was shifting my business, like you're saying, it was a real priority that those things had to be done, and so other things had to take a back burner. And the way my business and my team thinks about various tasks, we kind of think about things in a quadrant model where there's like 2 columns and 2 rows. And we think about things as important or somewhat important, urgent, not urgent. So if it's a task that falls in the urgent and important category, we call that a priority one or a P1. Those are things that need to be done right away. Those are big rocks, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Things that are either, for us, urgent but not important, or important but not urgent, those for us are both priority 2s. So assuming we can get the priority 1s done, we move to the priority 2s. Then there's the urgent or the not urgent, not important, and those are going to take a back burner. And it's something that we like to keep up on a weekly basis. And sometimes it even shifts more than that. But certain times, different tasks will shift their priority level. And so it's just keeping an eye on that. So whether it's documenting it in a spreadsheet, or if you have some system that you use with your business, I think keeping track of those things visually is helpful, or a list of things.
That's really helpful. I like that. I'm going to take it. I'm going to steal it for you.
Excellent.
Um,
One other thing I'd say, Jesse, just about just from the advice of working from home, I think communication is really important too. Communicating with your team, your coworkers, your staff, your manager, whoever it is, and just on a psychological level, people, it is a stressful time. So that sense of connection, community, coworkers is really important. Checking in on other people and helping them out if you can, and vice versa. Accepting help if it's offered to you, but keeping in touch with people and keeping the lines of communication open. If so, for example, if you're not able to get something done, don't just not accomplish it. Let somebody know that, I know I said I'd have this done for today. I'm really sorry I'm not able to do it today. Even between you and I, there was an email you sent me and I knew I needed to respond and I didn't have time to do it, but I sent you a quick message and said, hey, just wanted to let you know I got this email. I will have time to respond tomorrow.
for sure. Communication is key at always, but especially important at this time.
And method of communication too. That's something with working apart from each other, to consider what the most effective mode of communication is. A lot of the times people just get on email, so it's just email everything, but consider, when is it going to be actually more helpful to just pick up the phone and have a call? Or is there, if you do have a messaging system, maybe it makes sense to message in the messaging system. So there's different modes of communication. So taking that time to consider when each mode might be most useful for you and in your business and with various people, I think is also helpful. Maybe
For
even
sure.
making a plan for the team.
Yeah, I think I've taken a lifelong worth of Zoom calls within the last few weeks. Um, we are pretty close.
Yep.
If we have to run over a little bit today, I think it's fine because these are the pressing questions a lot of people do
Mm-hmm.
want answers to. Last question, then before we jump into parenting, is I'm hearing a lot of people cannot sleep. Either they can't fall into sleep, or they can't stay in sleep, or their sleep quality suffers,
Mm-hmm.
even though they can't really put their fingers on any particular issue.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something because of the current situation?
Yeah, I think so. So I do deal with a lot of people who have difficulties with sleeping, and the first thing for me is always thinking about when you're going to bed and when you actually do fall asleep. Are you falling asleep because you're relaxed or because you are exhausted? And the goal is to fall asleep because you are relaxed. That's what allows you to stay asleep through the night. So especially for people who are waking up in the middle of the night or 3 a.m. or whatever, my assumption, and this doesn't apply to everybody every single time, but a lot of the time it is because you have fallen asleep out of sheer exhaustion. The goal to be relaxed when you go to bed is there's a lot of different things you can do around sleep hygiene. That's what it's called when you do things like you're not looking at your cell phone in bed, or you don't look at a screen for an hour before you go to bed, or, whether it's take a warm bath or have a tea and some melatonin, or, whatever those things are. I think a big one that I would say for right now with COVID is that people are just more anxious in general and ruminating. And so I hear that a lot, like, oh, I can't stop thinking when I get into bed. And so probably my number one strategy outside of sleep hygiene is meditation. And meditation, some people think meditation means you're thinking about nothing, and that's not accurate. Meditation is focused thought. It's keeping your mind focused on one thing. And like resilience, meditation is like a muscle you have to build. So if somebody's like, oh, I've tried that, it doesn't work. Well, yeah, no, I'm not going to lift 200 pounds if I try and do it once either. Like, it takes concerted daily effort. And it doesn't have to be a long thing. It can literally be something that you do for 15 minutes.
Mhm.
What I recommend, and as someone who did not used to be a good meditator, I found it really challenging. I started out listening. I liked to listen to a guided meditation. So that's where somebody's talking to you and talking you through something and telling you what to think about. And then I found that I actually liked listening to a sound better. So for me, I like waves or thunderstorms.
Yeah.
And it's just something I just look it up on YouTube and I did it the other night before I went to bed. Actually, the last 2 nights, I've listened to thunderstorms. In your mind is inevitably going to wander. That is normal. And the goal is, as opposed to beating yourself up or getting frustrated, it's again goes back to that awareness of, oh, my mind wandered, bring it back and focus on the thought. For me, one of the things that helps is I will also try and do some visualization when I'm meditating. So for me, when I'm listening to my thunderstorm, I picture myself like in a cabin and, the windows open and I'm cozy under my blankets. Um, I like to also visualize, like if I'm at a beach, I'll kind of picture what my surroundings look like in my head. And I picture like the heat waves, like I visualize. That helps me keep my meditation focused. There are some people who just like to focus on their breath or breathing, or, the hum of an air conditioner. But, sometimes people say, like, and actually this is a new thing that I've heard with babies, is white noise helps babies stay asleep. And it is almost, it's something for your mind to kind of focus on. So for anybody who has tried meditation and is like, oh, it doesn't work for me, keep trying. You don't have to do it for long periods of time, but I really like meditation. I think there's lots of times that you can meditate in the morning. I think it's a great practice in your middle of your day, but I like it the best before bed, especially for those people who are ruminators and think, because it kind of kills two birds with one stone. Not only are you helping yourself get into a relaxed state, and a relaxed state physiologically, there's a big mind body connection, and helping yourself fall asleep so that you'll actually stay asleep. The other benefit is you're practicing meditation, so you're building up that skill and that awareness, that benefits you in your day-to-day life too. The last one I'd say, and this is a specific type of meditation, is called progressive muscle relaxation. And there's guided progressive muscle relaxations out there. You can Google it. And that involves tensing and releasing different muscle groups through your body as you're going through the meditation. And it really brings your awareness to like muscle tension and when you're starting to get stressed out in your day. For me, just teaching it to clients, I learned that I hold a lot of stress in my ankles, which seems like a weird spot. I always thought it was like, oh, my shoulder always hurts. Now I notice during the day that if I'm getting stressed, like my ankles will tighten and I'm like pointing my toes, and now I will relax them. And
You're
if
an
your
acrobat.
body's
Yeah.
if your body's relaxed, it's easier to kind of refocus those thoughts.
Great. So what I'm hearing is there is no one size fits all solution. It's really just try it out, see what works for yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
I love that your preferred meditation is actually thunderstorms. That's probably the least peaceful type of sound that I can imagine, but whatever works for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. So let's dive into parenting. For parents, I don't have kids myself, but I could
Mm-hmm.
only imagine for parents, there's this added layer of stress. Not
Mm-hmm.
only they have to protect their own mental health, and
Mm-hmm.
they probably are dealing with this for the first time, and they have to guide their kids as well. Now kids are bored, especially with the little kids. They don't know what to do. And my best friend's kid kept on asking her every 5 minutes, so what am I doing now? What am I going to do now? So for
Hmm.
parents, the discipline, home schooling, as well as how do you even help your kids to cope and understand what's going
Hmm.
on?
Hmm. Well, I guess I'll start first with just how to kind of manage the day-to-day parenting, because it is such a big transition with no matter your children's age, whether you've got, babies, toddlers, teenagers, or something in between. I think the first thing, again, kind of going back to some stuff that we've talked about before, is what are your expectations for yourself? How do you want to be as a parent? And being kind and compassionate to yourself. What's realistic? If you're not operating at 100% right now, that's okay. Like, don't beat yourself up for it. If you're operating at 10%, okay, maybe you got to pull it together a little bit. Like, there's a balance, right? And I think expressing those expectations to, if you have a partner or somebody that lives with you, as well as your kids, being really clear about what you expect and what is expected of them as far as, behavior or what's different. And I think it's a hard question to answer, because depending on the age of your child, you're going to talk about things with them in a different way. Like a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old doesn't need the same level of expectations, or same level of clarity around what COVID-19 is, as maybe a teenager does. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that is a something to consider and think about for yourself. The next thing, and this kind of goes to that, aligns with what I talked about, a personal success plan, but planning the day in general. And in certain ways, that feels really, for me, I'm not a huge planner, and it feels really like rigid, but in a way, actually making a plan for your day or for your children's day gives you a sense of freedom, because it really takes the guesswork out of things and the decision making in the moment. It just kind of prepares things. My coach actually, with my business, I have a career advisor, and she supports people in like resume, cover letter, those sorts of things. She did and the implementation stuff. She did a live stream the other day, and she was talking about her situation, and what she does with planning is she's using sticky notes on the wall. And she has different colors. Her kids are little. And for her, it gives her the ability, if she wants to change the schedule, she can move the sticky notes, but it can be like, hey, here's the outdoor time, here's the school time, here's the TV time or the screen time. And it's a nice visual for her kids to see and for her to kind of take the guesswork out. So I think it's kind of blocking the day, thinking about it hour by hour, not being too hard on yourself. If your work is less, like I have another client where she and her husband, they've got young kids, and they're really only doing about 4 or 5 hours of work each per day in order to take care of the kids at the same time. Like, that's the reality. I do find, from what I'm hearing, most managers, bosses, businesses are relatively understanding. I think, again, is something you got to communicate and talk about. But it's being realistic about what you can do. The last thing I think about is, work-life balance. We've heard about work-life balance forever. Something that's come up probably more in the last 5 years, maybe a little longer, is work-life blend. And now more than ever, it's inevitable that we have to work-life blend. So work-life balance is that you feel a sense of balance between your personal life and your work life, and you can separate them.
Mhm.
With work-life blend, sometimes it's like more of a intermix of the two things throughout the day. So it can go from, doing a load of laundry and making the kids lunch, to back to work, to playing a game or doing some education, to, bouncing back and forth. So thinking about, when can I be most productive with work? Is it before they wake up? Is it while they have a nap? Is it while they're doing their schoolwork? Is it after they go to bed? So it's thinking about your whole day and thinking about when the most effective times are for you to work, versus be parenting or be educating, something like that. And just taking it easy on yourself with what you need to accomplish, being realistic and not expecting so much of yourself. Again, I think that strategy of externalizing and thinking about, if my friend completed this much and they were upset about it, would I think like, what would I say to them? And you'd be like, of course you only got 5 hours of work done. You got two little ones at home. Like, don't, of course, just communicate that with your manager.
For sure.
One of the positives, and I guess one of the last things I'll say on that is the world of work is changing. I think one of the, even though this is a stressful and unprecedented, overwhelming, negative time for me, and this goes back to perspective, I always try and look at the silver lining or the opportunities. And you do have opportunities to spend more time with kids and family, which as much as it can be stressful is also a blessing and a real positive. As far as work goes, the world of work, there's old career concept was really about having your butt in the chair between 9 and 5. And more as flex work has become more common, new career concept is really more focused on outcome and what you produce. And so this having to go through a situation like COVID where we're forced to be working remotely, what I'm seeing is it's forcing people to kind of work in that kind of new career concept type of model. And it is much more about output. So having those conversations with whether it's your staff, your boss, your coworkers about whether it's what you expect from them as far as what you need from them, what you need them to accomplish, what the outcome is, as well as what they need from you and what you need to have accomplished. And then again, like I'm hearing, most managers seem to be, it depends on the type of business, but a bit more flexible around how and when that work is completed, as long as the outcome is there.
For sure. So two things that I keep hearing you saying is, number one, planning. This is
Mm-hmm.
planner's heaven, probably. Number two is be kind to yourself. And
Yes.
actually, the three things. The third one is perspective. Scan for the positive things that in this
Yep.
negative situation.
Yep.
And last but not least, as a psychologist, you're hyper aware, but you yourself as a human being and you have a business as well. So let's
Mm-hmm.
dive into your business. How are you doing? What do you find challenging and how your business pivoted?
Um, for me on a personal level, like I said, keeping my energy up as an extrovert, being alone in my office, that's the hardest thing for me. Um, for me as a business owner, I'm conscious of my team and how everybody's doing. Like I talked about earlier, thinking about the way that I'm communicating with them, I've definitely upped my communication. What research shows is that with a remote team, you need to be actively leading a lot more than when you're in person. So that's something that I've had to focus on more than in the past. In the early days for us, it was just making the transition so everything could be remote. So getting, as opposed to paying with credit card, debit card, whatever, now it's all online so that our clients can pay online. The invoice gets sent, they make the payment. We were already using an online platform. We've always done online counseling as well as in person. So we had to get more accounts because the volume of online increased. And then it was, for us, it was changing a lot of our messaging, whether it was on our website, our business page on Google, just making it really clear that we are open and operating so people were aware. And all of our messaging, our follow-up emails to clients or, before their appointments, things like that. But it's relatively business as usual. We're actually still hiring. So I've gone through the entire interview process with someone remotely. We've never met in person.
Oh, I
Yeah,
hope you've seen their faces.
we do video messages. Um, Obviously my anything that I was supposed to be like training in person, because I do organizational work as well, that's been just put on hold. But thinking about new ways to market, addressing, what are people's pain points? How can we help people? I think being more flexible with people around cancellation and just, I do think that's important as a business owner to give back or be understanding of people, whether that's your team or whether that's your clients or your customers. Yeah, I guess those are some of the big ones that I think about.
Yeah, for sure. And I really appreciate, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, I really appreciate your time. I know usually your rate, especially for corporate rate, is quite substantial, and you're doing this completely free. So thank you on behalf of Ownr and on behalf of everybody listening in.
Oh, of course, of course. I'm happy to. And I'm curious if there's any other questions that have come in because I'm happy to answer them.
Absolutely. So as we were talking, I actually already asked a lot of the questions on the list.
Yep.
And for those of you who want to enter your questions now, please do so before we close. I think a couple of things that I didn't get to cover is related to number one, related to meditation. How do I do it properly in a small cluttered condo?
So, good question. I think finding a comfortable place for yourself. Personally, I like to lay down when I'm meditating. Like if you think yoga, just lay on your back. So it could be in your bed or on a couch or on the floor. If the clutter really bothers you and is distracting, whether it's something where you can turn off your lights or close your eyes. I know for me that is a big thing. Like I don't like clutter, like it will stress me out. And so if you are in a smaller cluttered space, how can you make that clutter go away? I mean, is this something even just for your own self-care that you can do some organizing at home and make that space clear for yourself, or go into one room where it is tidy? Or can you close your eyes? Can you go out on a balcony? Something like that. I think remembering again that meditation is a muscle that you need to build the skill. It's not easy. Your thoughts will wander, and the goal is bring your mind back to something to focus on. And so, like I said, for me, I found the easiest way to start meditating was to listen to a guided meditation, so that if people are struggling or having trouble, that's what I would recommend. And then don't get frustrated if your mind wanders. That's going to happen. Just bring it back and focus. And what you should notice over the course of a few weeks, if you're doing it daily, is that your ability to focus and how often your mind wanders and you need to refocus will decrease over time.
For sure. Next one is tips to help with the need to go outside.
That's a tricky one. I do think everybody needs to go outside to some degree. So whether that is, for me, I just opening a window and letting fresh air in, usually in the mornings, if it hasn't been a super cold morning, we'll do that. Even if it's for a half an hour, just let the fresh air in. If you are going to go inside, I think it's hardest for people who are in condo buildings, who know they have to use the elevator and all those sorts of things. And I think it's just following like the typical, or not typical, but the recommended safety precautions, just washing those hands a lot, things like that. So with going outside, I think you can still do it and just be cautious about it, where you are, who's around you, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, for me, it's especially challenging because my condo doesn't have a lot of natural light. So
Mm-hmm.
I do actually need to go physically outside. But I think um, taking a walk on a side street with barely anybody is one thing, and that's totally okay. But the need of having this fake interaction with people by going to grocery stores too often, or finding excuses to be in somewhat a crowded area, that's probably
Mm-hmm.
that we want to recommend against. Um, and that's actually tied to the next question is some people see as much as the government recommends against it, there's still people seeing each other.
Mm-hmm.
How do you best advise them not to do so without I guess hurting the relationship with that person? They're doing something that's not
Mm-hmm.
right. You want them to stop, but
Mm-hmm.
there's some relationship concerns out there.
Mm-hmm. So I think the first piece of advice that I'd have, I remember reading that question. and I had this come up with a client the other day whose mom and sibling were meeting up, and the kids were involved, and she was just like, oh my gosh, this is really frustrating to me that they're doing this and breaking the rules. I think the first thing to keep in mind is you can't control other people. You can only control yourself. And so to spend a lot of your time, energy, emotions thinking about that, ruminating about it, is a waste. So that would be my first thing, is you can't control other people. You can influence them. So I think having a conversation with them and telling them about how you feel is not a bad thing. I think it's something like, my rule of thumb, if I have advice or I have an opinion about something, whether it's my husband or a friend, if I don't like what they're doing or the choices they've made, is I will, as a friend, like, I'm an honest person, I will share it with them, but I'm not going to revisit it a number of times. They know what my opinion is and they can choose to do it or not. I think the advice in how to communicate would be, the first strategy that I like is called de-arming their defenses. So a lot of the time, people get defensive. They feel like they're being attacked. And so the way I go about kind of de-arming that natural defensive reaction, like if you just say, like, what are you doing? Why are you seeing that person? They're going to get defensive, right? So I always kind of like to soften it up a little bit in my approach and tell them my intention about why I'm talking to them. So, it could be something as like, our friendship is really important to me. And there's something that's really bothering me and I want to talk to you about it. And I don't want to cause a fight or an issue. Like I said, the reason I want to talk to you about this is because we're friends, but it's really stressing me out, or it's really, I feel like I'm getting a bit frustrated when I hear da 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 da. So I think it's sharing your emotion, using I statements. So that also helps take that attack out. Like, with them going out, how is it impacting you? What is the way that you're feeling? What are you worried about their safety, other people's safety? Are you feeling frustrated, or does it stress you out? So I think thinking about those things and considering how to best speak to them about it, and to have that conversation and then leave it at that, because you can't control them. They know how you feel about it. You can, though, set boundaries. So for example, the client that I was speaking to, she had shared her concerns with her mom, and her mom continued to do it. And so she said to her mom, she set a boundary and basically said, how I feel about this, and obviously you're going to do what you're going to do, but I don't want to be aware of it and I don't want to talk about it. So if you're going to go down that path, then I would end the call at this point, because I don't want to talk about it with you.
Yeah.
And that can be harsh, and people feel like, oh, they're being mean or they're choosing, and it's like, no, you're not. You're sharing the boundary. If you talk about this, I'll end the call. But the other person is making the choice. Her mom can talk about it or not, right? Or her mom can continue to do it or not. So I think, just as citizens, and people who are all kind of in this together, I don't think there's a problem to voice your opinion. It's just how you do it, trying to do it in a productive way and a positive way, speaking about your intention. That's what I would say.
100%. And I think as Canadian, especially, we tend to avoid conflicts. So any potential conflicts, we feel uncomfortable to talk about it. But like you said, it's not about, we should be honest and voice opinions, but it's all about how, and be smart about your communication.
And a lot of the time when there is a conflict or a fight, it's because there's a difference in intention and impact. And that's something I think about a lot with having different conversations, whether it's a difficult work conversation, whether it's a situation that happens with your partner. Intent versus impact are two different things. So if, for example, if my intention is, I had a hard day at work and I want my husband to do the dishes, and I come home, well, now I'm at home, and I say, like, oh my gosh, why are the dishes all over the place? Da, 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 da. He's going to look at me like I'm crazy and go, like, I'm not doing the dishes. I'm going to go for a walk.
Yeah.
Versus if I think about what's the impact I want him to do the dishes. So how can I go about that in a way that's actually going to get that intended impact? I'm going to approach it way differently. I'm going to say, I'm sorry that I didn't do the dishes. I had a really hard day. Do you mind doing them, and I'll do them tomorrow? That sort of thing. So it's intention versus impact, and trying to bring those together so you hit the nail on the head.
Totally. And for those of who, I think this is a great advice for the people with probably now you're getting onto each other's nerves a little bit after the quarantine. If you have partners, roommates, families living together, this is great advice. And the next question, I think you already touched on this, is regarding special advice for seniors who live on their own but still uh, want to or can get out. I think you just mentioned on that in terms of how you communicate, voice your opinion, and set boundaries if they still don't follow.
Mm-hmm.
We have, let me just double check.
The other thing I'd say for seniors, just as a group, like obviously we know COVID-19 is having a bigger impact on them. So I think being really careful about those safety precautions. But the biggest thing is that, social distancing and hand washing. But as far as psychologically, especially for males who are seniors, it is common that they are more isolated, that females are more connected in general than males, just as an overarching trend. And so, a lot of people, the isolation has really ramped up, and that's really hard. So making sure that you're checking in with your loved ones. And if you are someone who is more isolated, even if you're feeling like, I just don't want to talk to anybody, it's still best to reach out, because oftentimes when you're in that negative mood, like I said, think about that triangle, make the phone call, even though you don't want to. And oftentimes after you do have that conversation, you're like, oh, I'm glad I had that conversation. It was nice to speak with them.
For sure. And I would even say that to other people as well. Even if
Mm-hmm.
I'm feeling fine, I want to check on my other friends and family and make sure that they are okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that outreach is very important as well. This one, there's a lot of questions around stress and anxiety, but we've already covered that.
Mm-hmm.
There's one particular one. How do I turn my mind to see the positive in this? Um, with I'm stuck in a place that seems this way of living will be forever. And how do I see positive with business closed, people losing everything, and the basically how do I turn my
Mm-hmm.
mind to the
Yeah.
positive?
That is a hard one, and it is challenging your thoughts. But I think even the fact that individual is addressing that means that they are trying. I think objectively, it just is a really hard time. It is what it is. But like I said, what is the silver lining? And to think about what you're grateful for is a really nice way to do that. I've had a few clients who are working on that right now, where they think about gratitude, whether it's in the morning or at night. Again, writing it down on paper, and sometimes they're small things, but for me, I moved right before this situation into a bigger space, and that's something I'm really grateful for. I could be grateful that I get to spend certain time with my family. I'm grateful that my internet hasn't had any issues over the past hour. It's all the little things. Being grateful and being self-compassionate are two of the most important things, because it really all does come down to perspective. And this is a really, not nice example, but pre-COVID-19, and I just come back to it because it's a really clear example. In Africa, suicide is not a phenomenon. It's not that it's never happened, but in North America, objectively, if you think about the quality of life that we have, the material possessions, the food, the shelter, all those sorts of things, we have a better quality of life in North America, in Canada. But suicide is rampant. And it comes down to that perspective of how do you look at your life. And so to think about just all the things that you can be grateful for, and try and focus on those things and be appreciative for those things, even though we're in a challenging time. It's accepting that there is uncertainty, and it's kind of just taking things day by day and being grateful, appreciating the small things. Like even this morning, I was like, oh, I'm so happy I still have one of my coffee pods left for today. Like it's a stupid little thing, but those are the things that make a difference. It's not here to there. It's all those little steps in between.
100% all about perspectives. And I think that advice can apply to the next couple as well.
Mm-hmm.
One is the lack of motivation in starting the day. uh, as well as a foggy brain during the pandemic.
Mm. So, okay, those are two good ones. So I think the motivation one, I think on one hand, recognizing that it's okay if your motivation is slightly down. It's a challenging time, and that's the case for a lot of people. Two is the planning piece that we talked about. For me, I like to do it at the end of the day. Before I go to bed, I have a plan for how my day is going to start. So that when I wake up, there's no guesswork. I don't have to think about getting motivated. I can just enter into my plan. Other people like to do their planning at the beginning of the day, so that's okay too. And I think thinking about those big rocks and starting with those big rocks. So, if you get up and you start working at 8 and you've accomplished your big rocks by 1, and then you don't really feel that motivated, you don't have to worry as much as if you've procrastinated all the important stuff till the end of your day. The foggy brain one is interesting because you gave the example of jumping jacks. And there's actually some science behind this. And there's a book called, I think it's called Mind Gym. And it does really talk about the mind-body connection. And the science behind it's kind of interesting, and the research. So this kind of goes to education. But back in the day, the theory with education was put the hard subjects in the morning. So put math first thing in the morning. And that's what they did. And then the easier subjects would go on throughout the day. And what they noticed was kids started to be a lot more engaged in learning after the first recess. And this led to a bunch of kind of neuroscience and cognitive research. And basically, in the center of your brain, what joins your two hemispheres is a band of matter called your corpus callosum. And so when people drink coffee, that to some degree does wake up your body, but it doesn't really turn your mind on. What turns your mind on is having signals cross over your corpus callosum. And so when you give the example of jumping jacks, and there's a number of different mind gym or brain gym, activities where you're basically crossing that center line of your body, it helps stimulate your brain and kind of turn your brain on. So if you're feeling really foggy, I think, again, be compassionate, have realistic expectations. You're probably going to be a little foggier than normal during this time. 2, maybe you got to move around a bit, do some jumping jacks, do some, like one of the ones is like taking your elbow and crossing it to your opposite knee on both sides. Another one is like using both hands out in front of you and making a figure 8, but having your like this, but having your eyes follow it. And again, you're crossing that center line. There's something to do with your ears. Rubbing the tops of your ears can help memory. So there's all kinds of mind-body connections. So brain gym is something that people could look up.
Great. Thank you so much for all the advice and the exercise training as well.
You're welcome.
I didn't see any questions from the live feed, but I think it's because we have already received so many of them ahead of time. And we have, I believe we've covered every single one of the questions. For the first time, we actually ran over, but this is so valuable and there's so much. I know there's a lot of information.
Yeah.
So we do record and upload to the YouTube. So if anybody wants to come back and revisit the video to digest, definitely do so. Thank you so much, Megan, for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. And I know you did put my contact information in the video as well. So if there are any questions that come from people watching this video later on, do feel free to email. I am being self-compassionate about not stressing if I don't get to my emails on the same day. So I will get back to you. It just might not be the same day.
For sure, for sure. I just put up your slide again for people just to take a look. But for tomorrow, we will send out an email with the follow-up information. So Megan's information will be there for you guys as well. As I mentioned, all the videos and previous webinars will be uploaded onto the Ownr's YouTube channel, which is the one you're currently in. So feel free to browse them, come back and revisit. And one thing, I know there's a lot of advice that Megan just offered, but gratitude is really key. So I would encourage every one of you to take a gratitude practice to thank yourself for being resilient or at least enduring all of these hard times, and think of what you have done well so far and thank yourself for doing that. And the second part is, has somebody helped you in the past in any kind of a way, big or small, and let them know how you feel. And for example, me, thank you, Megan. I have learned so much, and I know I will come back to this video again and again just to pick up on some of the things that I may have missed. So with that said, I know that we're way over time, but thank you so much for tuning in. And until next week, please take care of yourself, be well, and take care of your loved ones. Have a great rest of the day, everyone. Bye.